Okay, this is part two with the triangle, square, circle geometry experiments, you might say. Um, so this is back from the part one. This is a better look at the how the double rings of the circles would look. Give you a quick look on that. And this was the next idea I had, was to try to logically work my way through the forms. So make the pattern triangle into a square, and the square into a circle, and then the circle goes back into the cube, and then back into the triangle. It was my basic way of trying to go through the formation steps. And it might not be geometrically lawful, but like I said, I was experimenting with the idea. Produced this pretty cool pattern. Um, you go into a little more detail, but it's harder to do on this small grid paper. But just for a basic grasp of the concept, this is okay. Let's go to, and then I had, this was my next idea, was a deeper look into the transformation of the forms. Um, yeah, I hope this is geometrically lawful, as according to the stuff that Frank Chester talks about. So this was kind of my kind of kind of experiment. Let's see here. Yeah, so I went from the triangle, it moves into the square, into the icosahedron, back into the sphere, or not back into the sphere, back into the icosahedron, then back into the cube, and then back into the triangle. So I think those are the logical steps. I'll have to go back and check with those videos. But yet, regardless, it produced this really cool pattern. See if I'll zoom up on the top here. Yeah, if you look in there carefully, there's like, it almost produces like a five-sided star in there. So all kinds of little intricacies in here. Just the geometry of the rings itself was really cool. I'll have to do them all separate. One band of just the circles, and then one band of just the squares, one band of the icosahedrons, which is also really cool. That's the blue ones in here. And and they stay true to their form. It has the four-sided pyramid, just which is what an icosahedron is. So yeah, this turns out really interesting. And my next, whoops, my next experiment was this one, which is just the basic, just going through the basic movement in the forms with the triangle, square, circle. So the first step is just to do the triangles. Then the second step is just to do the squares. Third step is just to do the circles. And then the fourth would be to have all doubles sets. And this is just a very basic look. I didn't fill in all the details because it's just too much. I'd have to scale up with this small size graph papers. It's just too small for this. I'll give you a little close look here. Yeah, so that's the sequence, the triangle, square, circle. And moving into the sixth plane, the hexagram formation, which is always a little more difficult than versus the cube in some ways because there's more planes. Yeah, and speaking of planes and how to work out, what patterns are going to go in to when you want to fill in more detail, is I learned that from doing the Mark Roden Vortex math, because once you have a logical sequence, you know which direction it's moving in. So this is that plane. So now that you know this plane is always going to be in this formation, is going to be triangle, square, circle. So every time you come to this plane that's moving in the same direction, it's going to have that same formation, triangle, square, circle. It's not going to be the opposite. You see? It's going to stay true. And there's three main planes. So this one's moving this way. That means all these are going to move in the same way. Triangle, square, circle, etc., etc. And what else did I want to talk about here? We talked about the plane. Yeah, very interesting shape. Let's talk about just the shape first. It reminds me very much of the Frank Chester, some of his forms. And also here, when you really start to see there's a shape of a bell there. And then as you come up, more of an overhead. I mean, look at that. You know what that looks like? It looks like the bent pyramid. Yeah, it's pretty neat. And then also, there's a dragonfly angle here. If you look at it from this way, look at that. It's a dragonfly formation. It's got the two sets of wings. It's pretty cool. And you see it, it's moving in that, like this. See, all our dynamics of flight are based like this. We're thinking of cutting through the wind like this physically, but all these things are like, they're moving like this. It's pretty weird. Give you a proper overhead there. Yeah, so that's where I'm at. And that's part 2.